And we are live, and it feels like, well, forever since I have uttered those words, even though it was only a week. It was an unplanned week, and I think that made it feel like longer than it was for me anyway. I don't know about you guys. But I did have the flu. Yeah, the flu. Honest to God, I think it's the first time, I've had little viruses and stomach issues here and there, like anybody does, but I think that's honestly the first case of the legit flu I've had since 1996. And in 1996, I got a flu shot. And that was the last time I ever got a flu shot because I figured I actually got the flu like 3 weeks after the flu shot, maybe there was a correlation, but it certainly didn't work. I wasn't on my deathbed or anything. It was a weird flu, though. This influenza A going around this year is kind of weird. It's physically exhausting, and it causes these waves of nausea where you're not really going to get sick. You just feel like you are. It's really weird, and it made it very hard to think. My wife and I both agreed, even this weekend, so, a full week and a couple days into it, we didn't feel sick. What we felt was exhausted, completely and totally exhausted. So it is what it is. I survived it again, and apparently, like, having an immune system works. I would also say that I did go on the quercetin, heavy vitamin D, K2, and zinc protocol that I came up with during the COVID years. And I certainly took it less bad and had less length of it than my wife did, who did not do those things. So anyway, what are we going to talk about today? Well, the title of the episode, I'm sure you've seen by now, is 2025 the peak of Mount Stupid? And dear friends, dear neighbors, dear countrymen, etc., I have to tell you, no, it's not. In fact, I would call it a false peak, but we're going to look at some of the stupid on top of Mount Stupid today. What do I mean by a false peak? Now, I'm not talking about the mountains, that are like El Capitan, where people are using pitons and stuff to climb it, right? I'm talking about like your northeastern mountains, they're 3,000, 4,000 foot tall. And you're gonna go up the mountain, right? And you start going up the mountain, and you look, and eventually you see what looks like the top of the mountain, right? You're walking, and you're like, you could see horizon, and you can see where it levels off, and that must be the ridge line. And you get there, and then like it's just like an illusion, right? Like it's like, oh, you still got a long way to go, bud. And you're like on this little bit of a terrace that's up, up at a higher level, but nowhere near the top. I think that's where we are. It looks so much like the peak of Mount Stupid because there is so much stupid, but there's more stupid to come. But what are we going to talk about today? Well, we're going to talk about the Bitcoin strategic Bitcoin reserve, which is great news. So, of course, Bitcoin price went down. It's BTFD time for real. The special Bitcoin retards are just everywhere. Like, I think that like the libertarian autists that went full retard have nothing on the Bitcoin maxis who went full retard. And we'll talk a little bit about that too, where they're saying things like, an SBR is not what we signed up for. I can't believe you guys let this happen. Like, just so stupid. So absolutely stupid. I guess you didn't understand what uncensorable and borderless meant. And you thought it was only for your people, even though it was for everybody. I don't know. We'll talk about that and what it means. Then the biggest unreported story that's come out of this whole strategic Bitcoin reserve, this whole crypto conference and what have you, is about stablecoins. This is massive global economic shifting news. And somebody told you about it about 3.5 years ago. His name was Jack. Yeah, you familiar with him? Yeah, me, right? I told you this would happen, and now it's happening. And it's going to happen exactly the way I said it was going to happen, for the exact reason I said it was going to happen. If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry, we'll cover it. It's the third bullet point in. Now, the new leftist talking point for Mount Stupid: not participating in a war is actively supporting one side. Of course, I'm talking about Russia-Ukraine. By stepping back from the war and not giving billions of dollars to Ukraine, we are actively supporting Russia. There is no brains left on the side of liberals. There really isn't. Syria, another example of war stupidity, is descending into absolute genocide. But it's okay because Israel's happy, because their enemy's weaker. This is sick. I want to tell you what I heard on Fox News today. And I mean this when I say this. Every single person on that morning news panel should be taken outside and have the shit just beat out of them, honestly. Now, I'm not advocating for violence. I'm talking about just if there was any kind of what's karma in the world. Because to say what they said either requires an intentional massive ignorance or basically you're covering up murder intentionally. You pick which one you're doing. For all the tariff talk, do you know that most of the tariffs are not even in effect yet? They're still on pause. There's some, but everybody's going nuts about these tariffs. They're not even here yet. And they don't mean as much as people think that they mean. And I'm going to tell you what people really think about tariffs when you take away whatever like predisposes them to form an opinion based on the collective. When they just actually independently think and you give them a scenario, most people are actually for Trump's tariffs, whether they know it or not. Maybe they're wrong, but they're for them, even the ones that say they're against them. I ran a poll that showed us that. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the egg shortage that isn't. And then, has anybody else noticed that when the left either tries to be funny or cool, like they just make everything worse? Like, of course, I'm talking about the new video they put out with all of the squad members and idiotic women in the Congress pretending to be like, I don't know, Mortal Kombat characters or something. And then like the one that had like 22 senators saying the exact same shit. And shit was one of the words they said. That shit ain't true, right? Like, but it's everything they touch, including when they try to do something to hurt the right, and the right just parties with it and they can't understand it. We'll talk about why that is. I believe there's a definite mental disconnection between reality and people on the left. And this is not partisan, really. This is like just a critical analysis. Like, I think that if you go so far away from reality, then you can't be connected to it anymore in any way. It's pretty amazing, actually, some of the things that have been going on. And then the measles is proving I'm going to say about 40% of Americans learned nothing from COVID. Nothing. You're just as stupid as you were before COVID. I actually think they're more stupid. If you've worried about measles for more than 30 seconds in 2025, you're legitimately retarded. I'm sorry. You just are. And if you're in my audience and you're mad that I said that, I'm sorry. You're retarded. You know, we're allowed to say it now, so I'm going to say it. You're effing retarded. You're retarded the way that you meant it when you said it to your friend back in 1987. That's the kind of retarded you are. Like, you should know better and you don't. It's pathetic. Oh, you want tallow fries? Everybody's upset at Steak and Shake. They made a promise. They lied. I'll tell you about it briefly. But what is the solution? If you want tallow fries, what's the solution? Potatoes and tallow and a pan and your stove. Make your own freaking tallow fries if you want them that bad. Thomas Massey was right about the continuing resolution again, and the GOP is screwing you over again, including funding all the things that they say they don't want funded anymore, like USAID again. And in September, they're going to do it again. This is never going to change. And then last, I did a post while I was sick. I think it was either Friday or Saturday, and it was called The Perfect Day in the 80s, and it involves Pizza Hut. And I'm going to read it to you, and I'm going to tell you this resonated. Every place I put it, it resonated. It was pretty popular on X. It was very popular on Facebook. Every place I posted it, people loved it and said, yeah, I remember that. But then I have a question. One, can it ever come back? Two, if you're like 50 to 60 years of age, somewhere in that range, and you have you're young enough, you're old enough that you were old enough in the 70s, 80s, early 90s, that you have good memories. Like you really do know what happened. You know, you're not some 38-year-old who was like 2 shitting your pants during this time. You actually were there for it. But is it as good as we remember? And I'm not even talking false nostalgia. We were kids. Have you ever considered that maybe this glorious time to be a child, let's say, I'm going to say like late 60s up until like early mid 90s. I think it really was a glorious time to be a child. But was it really that great of a time if you were like your parents paying the bills? I think it was better than it is now in a lot of ways. And I think it was harder in a lot of ways too. I think we can learn from both of those. So we're going to try to have some fun at the end of the episode today, and we're going to try to extrapolate some knowledge from it as well. First up, though, before we get into it today, let's talk about our sponsors of the day. Number one today is JM Bullion. I am a Bitcoin bull. The first 3 bullet points of the show today are about Bitcoin one way or another. I put more of my money in Bitcoin than anything else. And Bitcoin is literally the only thing now that I buy every day. I guess I buy electricity every day, right? But I mean, like a non-discretionary purchase that's made daily is Bitcoin. I buy $5 of Bitcoin a day, and I recommend you do too. But I don't recommend that you ignore precious metals either. I think they both have different use cases. And when it comes to JM Bullion, they are the place I would buy my precious metals if I'm going to buy precious metals at all. And the reason is they sponsored this show for 13 years. They give you a discount if you're an MSB member. They do free shipping. And if there ever is a problem, I can talk to the president. The real question is, why would you buy your gold and silver from anybody else? Next up today, somebody that knows a little bit about wealth, John Pugliano with the Wealth Steading Podcast. He is also the founder of Investable Wealth, LLC. You should tune into his weekly podcast. It's really great. And John is like, he's the different type of investment manager. Most of these people that are in this space today, they started out by answering an ad in a newspaper or something like that. And they got training from somebody like American Express or Edward Jones. And they basically started out broke, asking people to invest their money so that they could become wealthy. Where John actually became a liquid millionaire through investing first, and then set up as an independent, and then started taking clients. And that is a unique position. It should not be unique. That should be the average investment manager today, but it's not. John is that guy. And if you want to learn more about how to invest your wealth, check out his podcast at wealthsteading.com today. All right. So let's start off with some Bitcoin stuff. And I'm going to remind you guys when I'm alone, if you want any chance of me seeing anything that you want to ask me as a question or ask me to comment on, you have to follow the protocol. And that is, if you're in the live chat, you put the word question or comment in all caps, and I'll star it for the end. And if you don't do that, I'm going to give you about a 99.9% guarantee that I'm not going to see it. So make sure you do that if you want me to answer any of your questions today. And it's a variety of topics today, so just about anything, except don't ask me about shitcoins because I will ignore that. All right. So the Bitcoin Strategic Bitcoin Reserve announced by the Trump administration on Friday was really great news that had a very underwhelming impact on people, except for the special triggered people we'll talk to about in the next segment. And I think the reason why is everybody was expecting Trump to announce a great big giant Bitcoin buy on Friday, which was never going to happen. And the news was actually better than anybody could have anticipated based on Trump's tweets prior to it on Twitter and Trump's Truth Social and whatever. He basically said, hey, we're going to have this strategic asset reserve, and it's going to have shit in it like Solana and Ripple and all these other shit coins. And then he tweeted like in a follow-up to it, yeah, Ethereum too, and of course Bitcoin. I love Bitcoin. So then when it comes out, it turns out that there's 2 entirely different buckets that are treated entirely different. And this is why, like, the Bitcoin price should just be ripping right now based on this news alone. So what the directive said is all the Bitcoin goes into this bucket over here, this reserve, and we are not to sell it. Now, we could sell it, but I'm directing the government not to sell it. In other words, at some point in the future, you could sell off anything you hold in reserve. That's the point of holding reserve. But it is specifically designed to be accumulated as a reserve to help protect our economics in this country, specifically our monetary supply. Because right now, you know, for all the talk about auditing Fort Knox, which isn't going to happen, if all the gold they say in Fort Knox is in Fort Knox, it's not 6 months worth of interest on the debt. That's how little it is relative to how much we've inflated the monetary supply. So we need something else in reserve is the mindset here. So then there's the digital asset bucket, right? This is everything but Bitcoin goes in that bucket. But the directive on that is, oh, you can totally sell the shit out of that if you want to. It's just a place for where the government has confiscated cryptocurrency in various legal actions for it to sit until we figure out what to do with it. One is a reserve bucket. One is a shitcoin holding temporary bucket. The directive goes on to state that the government shall increase the Bitcoin reserve by revenue neutral means. What does that mean? That means that you will not print money and buy Bitcoin, that you will not take appropriated money that is supposed to do a thing and then buy Bitcoin with it instead, that there'll be places where the government can find money that's not being spent, like, canceling shit that should have never been spent on in the first place, or those shit coins, you can sell those. That would be revenue neutral as well. So you sell the XRP, you sell the Solana, and you buy the Bitcoin. This is now official government policy of the largest economy and most powerful country in the world, and people are bearish on Bitcoin. There is no pleasing you, to quote, what's his name, Goldmember, right? Remember from Austin Powers, I guess it was 2, Goldmember, right? Then there is no pleasing you, right? So the special retards are at it again, and they're saying things like, this isn't what we signed up for. I can't believe you support this. These are the kind of people that when you're like, listen, man, there's going to be a hurricane. It's going to hit Houston, Texas next week. They say, I can't believe that you're pro-hurricane. Listen, no. If you live in Houston, get the fuck out, because this giant buzzsaw hurricane is fucking coming. And so then the giant hurricane comes and you say, see, the hurricane's there. And you go, I can't believe that you let this happen. That's how stupid these people are. There's a lot of things in our government that bother me that I don't talk much about. You know why? Because they're things that aren't going to change. And unless there's a specific thing you can do in response to it, I don't waste time on it. As much as I hate pedophiles, I am a member of the wood chipper club, man. I am, and I don't even want a wood chipper. Wood chippers are weak. I want those things that spin like against each other. It looks like a giant like pencil sharpener or something. That like you put a car in it and it like eats a car. That will take care of things. And I want foot first slow, right? So I hate pedophiles. Nothing would make me happier. You haven't heard me talk about Epstein's list much. You know why? Because you're not getting a list. You're not getting a list. There isn't going to be one. So the reason I don't talk about certain things isn't because I don't necessarily think that they're bad or horrible, whatever. Like, there's nothing you're going to do about that. So we don't spend a lot of time on it. Yeah. Well, but there's also things that you can do something about, whether they happen or not. And something like the United States government putting Bitcoin in reserve is a good thing for you if you're a Bitcoiner. To acknowledge that is to use your brain. To deny that is to be willfully retarded. Okay? That's what these people are. They're willfully retarded. And this whole you didn't sign up for it. This is the problem that a lot of these special, libertarians have that are also Bitcoiners. You think something is only for you when it's for everybody. And as soon as it's not just for you, you don't want it anymore. It's a similar problem that I talked about with some of the stuff Trump's done that is great. Like, you can't win because you don't know how to win. And when you do win, you get upset by winning. So you say it's not a win anymore because you don't really want to win. It's the same shit here, man. You now have what will be a growing, massive stockpile of Bitcoin. But Jack, everything the government has is stolen. I know that. And what are you going to do about it? Yell, scream? Start your own YouTube channel and tell everybody the government steals shit? So half the people can go raw, and half the people can tell you you're retarded? It doesn't matter. It is what it is. The government is going to spend less money on Bitcoin than it spends on interest on the debt. It's not even a rounding error to the total. I don't care that they're spending money that they shouldn't even have, because they're going to do that. I care what the impact is. And the impact of this for a Bitcoiner is very positive. But there's something much bigger going on here. And this is something I predicted over 3 years ago. It came out of this digital assets meeting. When I said it, I was told I'm an idiot, a moron. I don't know what I'm talking about. That'll never work. They'll never do it. And it has nothing directly to do with Bitcoin. But is there anybody out there that remembers me saying this more than a few times? What the United States is going to do is bring stable coins under FDIC or something like that. And they're going to then basically, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, to solidify stablecoins, but I don't mean that, codify them, make them legitimate, to give them a sense of legitimacy to the world. And then they're going to spread the dollar across the entire world as a last-ditch effort to spread inflation out across the entire planet as it relates to the dollar, thereby temporarily saving the dollar from complete devaluation. And I reinforce that with, you can be pissed that your dollar is inflationary. You can look at that chart from 1913 to 2025 a million times with a 99% devaluation. You can cuss and scream about it, but there is like way over half of the population of this planet would kill for that to be their currency. As bad as the dollar it is the most stable currency in the world. And many places in the world have made it very difficult for their citizens to hold dollars. But the reality, as we know, when it comes to technology and apps and things like that, is software is, if you can't stop drugs, you can forget about stopping software. And so if you make it to where anybody with a mobile device, anybody with a computer, anybody with a tablet, anybody with a phone, anybody with anything that can run software can have a wallet and hold dollars, they will. And if you then give legitimacy to the unit nationally, that will go on steroids, and all over the world, places that are not allowed to use dollars will be using dollars. I want to play something for you guys right now. When I heard this, I'm like, wow. I mean, I knew I was right, but I had no idea it would be this obvious when it happened this quickly. But this is Trump speaking first, and then it'll go over to one of his team members. And I want you to listen to what he says about stable coins and the dollar is the world reserve currency.
Administration is moving at tech speed.
We are going to keep the U.S. the dominant reserve currency in the world, and we will use stable coins to do that.
Your administration is moving at tech speed.
We are going to keep the U.S. the dominant reserve currency in the world, and we will use stable coins to do that.
All right. I'm not big on, the whole I told you so. But in this condition, in this particular situation, I effing told you so. I told you this would happen. It was a different president. There was no hope of this happening, and I told you it was going to happen. Now I want to tell you how I knew it was going to happen. Because if you get to the end game of something and you don't want it to be over, and there is a play that you can make, you will make it. That's why. It wasn't any special knowledge. I do have sources on a lot of things. I'm going to tell you, this is a place I couldn't get a source to confirm shit. My first confirmation that I was right, 100% confirmation I was right about this, was this Friday when that came out. But I knew it. I knew it in the fiber of my bones that it was going to happen. Because it makes perfect sense. So you got a United States cabinet member saying, we will keep the dollar as the global reserve currency, and we will use stable coins to do it. This is why the Orange Man had a 180 on Bitcoin. Remember, Orange Man was not necessarily anti-Bitcoin, but he certainly wasn't pro. He wasn't crypto pro at all in his first administration, was he? I like the good old US dollar, like typical boomer shit. But there's a point where if you're as smart as Trump is, and he is a smart man, whether you like that or not, he is a smart dude. Doesn't mean I agree with him, but he's smart. And if you say he's not smart, you have TDS, and I don't want to talk to you. I don't have any time for stupid right now. And when you eventually kind of look at everything, you start bringing people around like Elon Musk, and they start showing you the math behind it. The one thing a real estate developer understands is fucking numbers. And they can sort out that this isn't going to keep going. But how do you fix inflation once you've already printed all the money? There's only two ways to fix it. One is to start contracting the monetary supply. Good luck with that. That's nuclear bombs going off all over the world, financial nuclear bombs. That's the derivative cascade that I talked about all the way back in 2009. You cannot do it. The economies of the world would not survive an intentional willful contraction of the monetary supply right now. It's going to happen eventually. But if they did it on purpose and signaled that that's what they were doing, mushroom clouds everywhere. There's only one other play you have then. And that is if you have too many units of money, too many units of dollars, is to get more people using the units so that the per capita spend goes down per individual. That's it. That's the only other play you have. And this is a perfect way to get that play done. Right? It's a perfect play to get that way done. Lily Farms Food says, I think they're going to do a Bitcoin-backed bonds like Sailor is doing. I don't think that they will yet anyway, and I don't think that they can. It's not revenue neutral. A bond is a loan. So if you put out, let's say, some sort of Bitcoin-backed U.S. savings bond and you use the proceeds to buy Bitcoin with it, then the government has to pay the money back. It's not revenue neutral. Maybe some bean-headed, propeller-headed, pocket protector wearing government accountant could come up with a way to say that it is, and maybe they'll do it. But I don't think that's going to happen. Tom says silverback community coins. Gee, why didn't I ever think of that, Tom? Why didn't I ever think of that? You know what we should do? Here's what we all should do. We should all start trading silver again. It's dead man's money. It's dead man's money, Tom. It's over. It's not going to happen. We live in a global economic system, and no matter what you think, no matter how much we talk about local community, it's not going away. It's not going away. It's not. We don't need silver coins for each community either. That's dumb. You want to use silver coins? I tell you what, 1964 and prior junk silver, buy it at spot and use it and see who takes it. It's just not going to happen. There is this willful idea, this wistful nostalgia that we can go back to where we were. We're not going to go back to where we were. We have a new reality that we exist in. And we live in a time, and it ain't going to change any time. It's only going to become more true that good money must move at the speed of light. It must be weightless, and it must transcend space and time, and it must hold value. There's one thing that does that, and it ain't silver. It ain't silver. It ain't silver. It ain't silver. Sorry. It ain't gold either. They both have a place, but that's not it. Okay, new leftist talking point. Let's go on from there. Like I said, Bitcoin, this is probably the best time it's ever been to be accumulating Bitcoin. We are not at the end of the cycle, and the stable coin is going to work in combination with the Bitcoin reserve. Exactly how, we don't know yet, but this is exactly what I told you would happen. But now we got a new leftist talking point that I think is really interesting. The Ukraine is now fighting Russia and the United States. This is actually being said on like places that at least fancy themselves to be legitimate news sources like CNN and MSNBC and CBS, etc. They're actually saying those words that Zelensky now has to fight the Russians and the Americans. Let me explain something to you about America's military capability in a place like Ukraine. If the Americans actually were engaged in combat with Ukraine, Russia not involved, Ukraine could cease existence in a day or three. We are not actively participating in the war for the first time since it started. And to the left, this equals we are siding with the Russians. I want you to just, I know this is hard for some of you because you're still stuck in 1985. Don't worry, we're going to take a trip there at the end of the show today, a good trip. But you're still stuck in 1985. You're still stuck with the mindset of like Red Dawn in Russia, right? Like, you know, and like the Russians being the bad guys. Like that was wrestling, guys. It wasn't even real then. Russia probably has more in common with the United States right now than Ukraine does. That's hard to believe because the TV says it's not true. But I'll tell you what, if I could either live in rural Russia right now or rural Ukraine, I had to pick one of the two. Somebody's coming to get me. That's the only question I'm going to be asked. We're going to drop you off in rural Russia or rural Ukraine, and you're going to be allowed to live there. And you don't get a choice. Russia. I mean, Ukraine's the one that suspended elections. It's just asinine. But let's pretend it's not Russia, Ukraine. let's pretend that, oh, I don't know, Ecuador and Colombia go to war with each other. Good as any other place. Panama and Colombia go to war with each other over the Darien Gap. I don't know, whatever, right? And the United States says, fuck it. Fight it out. We don't give a shit what you do. Which should be our real stance. Like, we're not involved in this. And then somebody comes in and says, so the United States is clearly on Colombia's side. Don't you think? Don't you? Oh, I'm not doing this, guy. I'm not. Don't you think that if you were to make the case, let's say again, let's go up, Peru and Ecuador, right? Like, I'm trying to find two nations we have no strong feelings on. Peru and Ecuador are fighting with each other, and we don't get involved. And then somebody says, well, clearly we're on Peru's side. Couldn't you make the equal case that we're on Ecuador's side since we're doing the exact same shit? But here's the even better. Peru is who we decide we want for whatever reason. We have to stick our nose in this one too. We give Peru $300 billion of money and weapons and training and support. The war goes on for 3 years. And we say, Peru, we're done. We've given you as much as we have to give. It's up to you now. We suggest you find a way to negotiate a peace. You can have all the shit we gave you already, but we're not giving you any more. And somebody says the United States is supporting Ecuador in the war. You would look at that person like they're a complete and total retard. And you should. We've given $300+ billion worth of shit to Ukraine. U.S. taxpayers are currently paying the retirement accounts of Ukrainian retired bureaucrats. We're paying the pensions of their bureaucrats. But we're supporting Russia because we are no longer giving money to Ukraine. I don't know, man. I don't know where people get off even saying stupid shit like this. But what I've kind of ascertained over the last couple of years, the fact that something is completely and patently untrue doesn't mean anything to the left. I don't even think when they're doing their little brainstorm stuff anymore, they even think about it like, well, is anybody going to believe that? Well, they'll believe what we tell them. And when they don't believe it, they act like, oh, they're all crazy. Trump took over. Elon's the president. Whatever kind of stupid shit they say. And then when people like throw it back in their face, they're like, oh my God, how did we lose credibility? Why don't they trust us? Because you're lying, and you know you're lying when you lie. It's unbelievable to me. Syria is descending into absolute genocide, but it's okay because Israel's happy about it. Israel said, even though it's bad stuff, at least our enemy's weaker now. And everybody just, AIPAC sends out their little guys to take, each one of their little congressmen aside. You know that, right? Your congressman and both your senators have an AIPAC guy. Now, let me explain what I really mean about this. It's a 1-to-1 ratio. AIPAC is the Israeli lobby, in case you don't know, because you lived under a rock. And what I mean by that is, for every U.S. congressman, there is a dedicated single person to that congressman from AIPAC to make sure they don't stray. One person in your Congress doesn't have an AIPAC guy. One. His name is Thomas Massie. And they're going to do everything they can to get rid of him next time. They're going to do everything they can. More on Thomas Massie in a bit. But this is what I saw happen in Syria yesterday. Syria militia walking around, finds a guy that they don't like, shoots him in the leg, makes him hop upstairs, laughs at him, drags him back down the stairs, shoots him in the back of the head. But it's okay because Israel's happy. Now, how did this happen? We got to get rid of Assad. He's a dictator, blah, 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 blah. This is what I've determined about the Middle East. Anything that is remotely stable in the Middle East, the United States and Israel will destabilize. Above all things, we don't want stability in the Middle East. We say we do, but we don't. We say we do, but we don't. Tell me what we haven't destabilized in the Middle East that was stable. Lebanon used to be stable. We destabilized that. Syria was very stable. Syria was the last stable entity, other than like, our good friends, the Saudis, which have their own problem, by the way. But truly stable entity, other than like UAE, Saudi, and Qatar, right? That little the Arabian Peninsula, they play ball, so we'll do what they want. The rest of it, no. We can't have anything approaching stability. Even Gaddafi was stability. Libya was a very stable country. It never caused any problems. We fucked that up. Egypt was stable. We fucked that up. We want it to be a clusterfuck. I don't have any other explanation other than we want it to be that way. And we don't care who gets murdered. We don't get who gets killed. And this does go in the column of I don't talk about it that much. And the reason I don't talk about it that much is there's not much we can do about it. There really isn't. And I don't know what the solution to it is other than the United States eventually saying, not our problem. But right now, the hooks are in way too deep for that to happen. Way too deep for that to happen. Now, for all the tariff talk, and the stock market's crashing because tariffs. The economy's bad because tariffs. Blah, 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 because tariffs. Things are expensive because tariffs. About 90% of the tariffs that Trump has talked about have either not gone into effect yet or been called off. It's been mostly talk. There are some tariffs in effect, add-on tariffs to what were already there with China, and some with Canada. But most of them have either been deferred for a time or a new deadline is set, and it's like April 2nd or something like that. And this is back to what I've always said about Trump's tariffs. Trump's goal is to have no tariffs. But he's not going to let other countries have tariffs on us, and then we don't have tariffs on them. And again, I think it's really helpful. To take away the emotion when evaluating an issue. So I ran a poll on X last week, the week before, something like that. And I said, if a nation has high tariffs on U.S. goods, what should America do in response? A, nothing. Okay. B, tariff them at half of what they tariff us at. So just take a little bit back, right? C was exactly match their tariffs. And D was double their tariffs. The hands down winner was exactly match their tariffs. The number 2 was double the tariffs. Literally nobody voted for tariff them at 50%. And about 5% of people said do nothing. Now, the do nothing people, I'm going to tell you who they are. They're libertarians that are principled. They may be retarded. They may not be. I don't know. I didn't have a long conversation with them. Here's what I mean. They legitimately believe that when a nation tariffs imported goods, it only hurts their citizens. And so their mindset is, so if China tariffs U.S. goods, they hurt China. Why should we hurt America because China hurt China? That's their mindset. The problem is these people live in a vacuum, and that vacuum isn't real. Okay? When you have a nation the size of America that has the industrial capacity we do, that very much would benefit from more export markets, and our products are heavily tariffed just about everywhere that we sell them into. And what you have to understand is there's only so many countries in the world that actually can afford to buy American imported goods. American imported goods are expensive before they're tariffed because people make good wages in America, and it costs us a lot more money to export than it costs us to import for a variety of reasons. So we're already at somewhat of a disadvantage if everything's par. When you put tariffs on U.S. goods and you don't put tariffs on goods imported to the United States, there's a double thing that happens there. One is we get that massive trade deficit. So our money goes out for junk product coming in, and we don't benefit from it. But the other thing that happens is people, I don't care how many times people put Made in America Matters on a t-shirt or something, people go to stores and they buy the thing that costs less if they think it's good enough. Period. With international trade, if that is because this nation legitimately can make this product less expensive because they're better at it, that's actually part of international. That's good. The reality, though, is that what we're doing is we're having this, again, this like we're in a vacuum tube that's not like it's got a hole in it. That's not what's happening. This other country is making shitloads of their product, selling it in their own country at high volume, inexpensively, exporting it to the United States and selling more of it. And because of that, their economy of scale is increased, and they're driving down the cost of their goods sold while driving up the cost of ours. Let's look at it in a different way. You're company A, and I'm company B. And I have the ability to make your product cost more. I have the ability to just tell any retailer, when you get company A's product in, add 10% to it. Whatever you would mark it up, let's say you're going to mark it up at 20, now mark it up at 30. And I make the retail price of your product higher just by telling the Walmart, right, or Lowe's or Home Depot or, the car dealership or whoever. I can just tell them to charge more for your product. Now, they make the money, but you pay the money. But now I've offset the competitive market through an artificial implementation. I know what a lot of you want to tell me. Tariffs are bad. Tariffs are bad. Tariffs are bad. Tax is theft. Tariffs are a tax, so tariffs are theft. I agree. But you can't live in that fucking bubble. I'm sorry. It's not possible. We live in a globally connected economic system. And when you allow other nations to do this to us, you get exactly what has happened. And all you have to do to understand, this is the problem. We are so insulated from the reality of our own destruction. Meaning that Bill grew up in a little town. He liked it, but he had to leave, and he moved to Dallas. And he has a job doing some fucking meaningless paperwork that doesn't matter for some meaningless bullshit, but it pays well. So he doesn't understand that his entire job, maybe his entire industry, is propped up bullshit. And that's let us live in this artificial bubble, this fake bubble, this fake vacuum tube. For about 30 years, we've lived with just the guts of this country being pulled out. Like, remember in Braveheart, where when they executed somebody to torture them first, they cut their stomach open and pulled all their guts out until they begged for death, and then you kill them, right? To make them, like, one last time pay homage to the king. And only Braveheart had the guts, even when they were pulled out, to just scream freedom, and they gave up and killed them, right? That's what's happened to our guts, our economic guts in this country. I've been to so many small towns throughout the whole country. I mean, coast to coast, center, all of it. And you go to these towns and you look and you go, there was something here. There was something here. I've seen it in Allentown, Bethlehem, Easton, right? When you listen to the song Allentown by Billy Joel, like the perfect visual would just be driving through like Bethlehem with a camera from your car and just showing all these rusted out old steel production facilities and stuff like that. I was in central Louisiana, pretty much like southern Louisiana, in like these farm areas. And I'm going by these towns, and they have like trees growing through the roof of the downtown buildings. But yet there was this, like, all this tourist stuff used to be there. Big lakes, giant houses, everything. But everything had just fallen apart. Those are pretty disparaging. Go up around like Sherman, Texas, and look at all the little towns around Sherman, Texas, up by the Oklahoma border. Completely gutted and eviscerated. There was another town in Arkansas that me and a buddy stayed at a couple times. You could drive through this town and you could find that there used to be an incredible industrial base in this town. And when I talked to a guy at a bar in this place one time and said, what happened? He said it was the 70s when it all went away. He said it all went overseas. And this has happened over and over and over and over and over in this country. And we have two problems. One is directly related to what we're talking about. It is the gutting of the industrial base by taking away the economic incentive to manufacture in the United States. So the incentive, once again, is perverse. It just makes more sense right now to manufacture your shit anywhere but here. China, they have the infrastructure, and pretty much you can design something and make it like a person can start a business from their house on Alibaba, and they'll start making it and shipping it over for you. So they have that. But if you're a larger company and you're willing to invest in your own tooling and shit, there's plenty of places to manufacture other than China. Go look at go to a typical store and start looking at the tags on t-shirts and see where they come from. You'll find from all over the world. So we have that setup, that perverse incentive. But the other side is we've destroyed the mindset of the American worker, and nobody wants these jobs anymore. Now, that's a lie, but it's also the truth. And what I mean by that is, if you're a kid and you're in school right now, and you come from any sort of upwardly mobile family, you're like 15 years old, and somebody says to you, Johnny, what do you want to do? And you say, I just want to go out and get a good job with good benefits. You don't want to go to college? You know, oh, you're going to be a loser. Like the idea that you would have a 40-hour-a-week factory job and be considered a winner in America, we've destroyed that mindset. Why? Why is it bad to have that kind of a job? Don't you think there's a lot of, especially men, that actually want jobs like that? They want a job where they can see that they did something and something came out of the other end of it at the end of the day. When I was a kid, one of my uncles, he did undercoating for sinks for a company called Standardized Sinks in Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. He was very good at his job. He liked his job. He thought it was a great job. He made really good money. And then there were parts of the year where he might get like a partial layoff or have his hours down. But he didn't care because that was usually during like hunting season. And then there were times of the year where he was getting tons of overtime. My dad came up in the construction industry. In the late 60s, early 70s, my dad made about the same money that a general practice doctor made at the time because he was working 70 to 80 hours a week in construction. Why have we decided this is not a good way for people to earn a living? I've worked both worlds. I've been right in corporate America, high-level VP of sales, high-level director of marketing type jobs. And I've worked out on the side of the road putting cables in the ground. I've done both. And I'm going to tell you the only reason that I was much happier in marketing and sales than on the side of that road is wages. That was it. Because I was making $40,000 in one job, and then I was making about $180,000, $200,000 in the other. If I could have made the money doing that work, running direction, I mean, it's cool work, guys. Directional boring equipment is awesome. The fact that you could set up a machine here and shoot 1.5 miles down the freaking road and pull cable in the ground, like, it's cool. Running excavators is fun. Digging shit up is fun. Breaking shit is fun. But it didn't pay shit. We have just devalued manual labor because we'll just get, immigrants to do that work. And guys, at least at one point it worked. Now that whole, like, you can only cheat for so long before quality starts to decline. When I first came to Texas, this is 1994, 1993. I ended up doing other things, but one of the things I did a little bit of is I did framing work for houses. It happened like this. I went to a bar one night, and there were some guys there, and they were cracking some beers and shit, shooting some pool, and I was shooting pool with them. And they start talking, like, well, what do you do? And I just moved here. And sometimes I work at this place as a bouncer, but that's only on certain nights, and I'm looking for something to do. The guy goes, you want a job? I said, yeah, what do I got to do? He says, be outside tomorrow. We'll pick you up. Bring a hammer. You got a hammer? If you don't have a hammer, get a good hammer between now and tomorrow. That was it. In like a week, I knew how to frame houses. $10 an hour cash money. Now, they were grifting a little bit off, right? As subs. But, I didn't care. It was 1993, $10 an hour, and I learned a skill. Today, I guarantee you that would never happen to me in a bar in Texas. I would never get that opportunity, even at that lower rate. And you know what? That's all I was worth. I mean, I'm a hard worker. I show up on time. I mean, I'm a vet. Veterans can't be late for anything. We feel like we've sinned against all sins if we're just 5 minutes late to something. So, but when it came down to it, I didn't know anything about framing. And honestly, I didn't want to keep doing it. So once I was like, oh, now how to do this now, I went and did something else. But this used to be how America was. Like, you could just go somewhere and start looking for a job. And the fact that you wanted a job, you were going to find a job. Like, oh, it's a young guy with a strong back and he wants a job. I know 3 people hiring right now. When I first moved here to Texas, it was not hard to find a job at all. They didn't pay that great, but you could get a start. And all you really had to do was be willing to show up and work. We've destroyed everything. And what this tariff thing is, and it won't be clean starting out, is at least an attempt to rebalance things. I'm not saying it's going to work. Right. And this guy, Liberty Guard, says he was making $9 an hour in 93 with a college degree. And I was making 10 framing houses with no experience. If I would have kept doing it, I would have been about 15 an hour in a few months. But it just wasn't something I was really interested in doing. And I got better opportunities. Now, the other thing I want to talk about, though, with the tariffs before we move on is just the dumb. Like, if you go on Facebook right now, and I did, and I kind of regret it, you would think that Canadian liquor stores taking Jack Daniels off their shelves is literally the worst thing that's ever happened to America. It's worse than Pearl Harbor Day and January 6th, because that was terrible, right? Put together. Like, oh my God, they literally took Jack Daniels. I don't give a shit. First of all, anybody that's talking to you about whiskey that invokes Jack Daniels doesn't know shit about whiskey. Jack Daniels is, at best, low mid-grade whiskey. I'm sorry. I know it's like an American tradition or whatever, but if you're drinking Jack Daniels, you don't care about the quality of whiskey. You just want to get drunk. Second of all, who gives a shit? How much of the United States economy do you think is based on selling freaking Jack Daniels to people in Ontario? Not much. Now, if you're Jack Daniels and you might see a 2% downturn in your sales, which, by the way, alcohol sales are down across the board anyway. Why do you think they're talking about it? Because they already know the numbers are bad. So now they can blame Orange Man for it. Because you know who's not drinking? Gen Z. Good for you guys. You're not. Gen Z is much more likely to use a little bit of cannabis here and there. Maybe have a drink or 3. But they're not drinking hardcore like the previous generations. And so alcohol is having this natural decline in popularity. And I think that's a good thing for America's health. And I think there is kind of this upswing in caring about health in America too, fortunately. But I am not worried at all about the Canadian tariffs. I'm actually more worried about the Chinese tariffs. And I'm not that worried about those either. But this idea, like, I mean, the other thing we have to look at with this, what are they? Well, this truck that was $75,000, now it's going to be $100,000. First of all, Canada doesn't make that many trucks. A lot of parts do come from Canada, but Canada doesn't make that many. The problem isn't that the $75,000 truck's going to cost $100,000. Who can point out the problem with what I just said? And it's not the tariff. Don't you think it's the fact that a pickup truck costs $75,000? Don't you think that's the fucking problem? Don't you think that's what we need to address? The fact that a fucking truck, when I was, back in that timeline when I was slapping framing together for $10. Oh, one thing I want to say about that, all this immigrant labor doing that work now, it's dog shit labor. The quality is shit. You could not get me to buy a house built in the last 10 years. I'm sorry. If I were to build a house, like a Jackistan becomes a reality, and I commission a custom build, I will be on that job site every fucking minute while that house gets built. The quality of new construction right now is absolute dog shit. What I have seen, the quality that a ninth grader in my woodshop class was capable of was better than that. Just as an aside. It is absolutely ridiculous. But why are we paying $75,000 for trucks? Why are we paying $50,000 for like just regular cars? If you actually want to fix this country, you need to understand how imperative transportation is to people. And we need to completely overhaul the way we manage the automotive industry, because there's no reason we couldn't be making really damn good, safe cars for $20,000 to $25,000 right now. Instead of telling me, well, if we don't 100% tariff electric vehicles made in China that are actually made in Mexico, we're going to have a bloodbath in the U.S. auto industry. Why don't you fix the fucking U.S. auto industry? I mean, seriously. Why is it so expensive to make a car in America? Because Americans are paid so much more? Bullshit. The average person in China has a median income right now that's equal to the median income in America. Now, sure, if you go out into Zewatin to whatever China in the middle of Jabip, sure, people are poor as shit. They're poor as shit in Appalachia too. If you go look at what a person makes and what we would consider like middle class income in China and the United States, it's almost identical now. You're living 25 years ago. Regulations. Regulations are why things cost so much in America. We have regulated ourselves out of affordability. So we need to change how we approach this. I mean, the other thing that's made life unbearable in America is the cost of healthcare. And a complete unwillingness of anybody in the discussion to have an honest discussion. Health insurance is not, can never be, and shall never be healthcare. This is how we screwed up everything. We told people you have a right to healthcare. You do not. You have a right to access it, but you also should pay for it. You have no right to somebody else's labor. I'm sorry. That doesn't work that way. You don't get to say, you have a right to my labor. No. Okay, so you don't. So that was the first lie. And then the second lie is, and health insurance is health care. Is car insurance car care? Is fire insurance house care? What insurance equals care? I mean, you have to maintain your car even if you have insurance on your car. Insurance on your car is because you get a wreck. Somebody steals it. Somebody damages it, right? That's your car insurance doesn't cover your fucking oil changes, nor should it. Your car insurance doesn't put new tires on your car. Your car insurance doesn't put gas in your car. People have been told this bullshit so much, they want health insurance to cover everything and cost nothing. And there's no place where that's true, where that happens that way. When 40% of your income is going toward healthcare, it doesn't matter if you're paying it or the government's stealing it and then paying for it. But why is health insurance so expensive in America? Why? Do you think Aetna or Concentra or United Healthcare or whatever wants the price of a policy to be high? They do not. I know that seems crazy. They want to make lots of money per policy holder, and they would love to be able to sell that policy as cheaply as possible, because the cheaper you can sell, the more business you get. See, the problem with the left is they don't understand economics. So what I just said just rattled around in their brain, and then they just screamed, he's a Trump supporter. Like that's an answer, right? No, like if I wanted to be in the health insurance industry, this is what I would want to do. A single individual, $150 a month, and this will guarantee you never go bankrupt. You go to the doctor, you pay the bill. It's your business. It's your bill, you know. But, you know, if you get in an accident, we cover everything. $150 for an individual, $250 for a family. That's what I want. Do you know why? Because I get all the business. Why is it so fucking expensive? Because here's what happens. Bob goes to the doctor and says, I just don't quite feel right, doc. The doctor looks at Bob's insurance. He works for a car manufacturer. He has one of those beautiful insurance policies that covers everything. What does the doctor do? He orders every test in the book. Then he puts Bob on 2 or 3 medications. Does Bob need them? No. But, you know, the doctor gets to bill more if he puts him on the medication. So he does, because the incentives are perverse. Then what do we tell everybody? You should have a diet based on, you know, carbohydrates. There's 3 macro ingredients. 2 of them are required for your survival. 1 is not. Okay? This is biological fact right now. As a human being, you need protein and you need fat. And without those 2 things in sufficient quantity, you will die. I don't care if you don't like when I say that. I don't care if your health teacher in 7th grade told you it was otherwise. I don't care what anybody tells you. If you ask any doctor and you pull their head out of their rectum long enough for them to think, dietarily, if I remove all protein from a human diet, what will happen to that person? Well, they will eventually die. If I do it with all fat, they will eventually die. If I remove 100% of all carbohydrates from a human diet and I give them sufficient fat and protein, what will happen? They will be perfectly healthy. So the one thing we don't need, we've built all of our diet on. Our obesity rates skyrocket. There's more freaking dialysis clinics in America now than there are like Subway restaurants. There is no world in which this is a sustainable way to live. And we are hitting a brick wall of death and disease in America right now. And it ain't got nothing to do with COVID or flu or measles, does it? Not a damn thing. So in all of this, we have the egg shortage. Eggs. Now, first of all, I'm going to tell you that I think a huge number of people bitching about eggs don't care about eggs at all. At first, there were people that hated Biden. And Biden did cause it. So, well, Biden's administration. I don't think Biden caused anything. I think Biden had no clue what he was doing for like at least the last 2 years of administration. But Biden's administration murdered millions and millions of chickens because a PCR test said so. It's that simple. So a lot of people who really didn't give a shit that eggs were $5 a dozen, because when you see these people like eggs are $10.50, you're retarded. I don't want to listen to you. I know what you're doing. I know how you're gaming the system, and I do not care to listen to you at all. I'm sorry. But $5-6 a dozen is national average. The average person doesn't eat that many eggs, especially these retarded idiots that are talking about it now, right? And so it's not crippling to pay $5 for a dozen eggs. It really isn't. It's probably about what they should be priced at anyway, without all the subsidy and bullshit that goes on with the industry. But it's really easy to point at it right now and go, look, Trump's been president for 5 weeks. Eggs are still expensive. So I think there's a whole lot of complaining that's not real. I was at Costco this weekend or Friday, and they had a limit 3 cartons of eggs, including the big giant, like 60 egg flats. And people bought some eggs. There was no massive amount of eggs being bought from Costco, and they were far less expensive than a national average, by the way. I think it's just like, it's a football to argue about, but why do you think this happened? Because they killed all the chickens? I don't think eggs are even that much in shortage. I think the price is somewhat artificially inflated. And I think there's 2 sides to it. You can actually create a shortage by saying there's a shortage, because then people buy more of the thing than they normally would have. That's why as preppers, we do not wait until there's an emergency to buy things. We buy them and put them away in advance, right? So when people say we're hoarders, they're lying fucks. You're the hoarder. The person who freaks out and goes out and buys 27 flats of water because there's going to be a hurricane or a pandemic or whatever, that's the hoarder. The person that buys an extra flat of water once a week until they're like, that's enough flats of water, and they just start buying to replace, they're not a hoarder. They didn't take from the system at a time of stress. I think a lot of the egg shortage right here is because people went crazy when people started talking about it, which is pretty typical. It's really pretty typical. But if you actually believe that it's because of the flu, the bird flu, and we had to do it, you're an idiot. I'm sorry, you are a moron. I don't know anybody that's had any problems with their birds. And I mean, I know people that have 4, and I know people that have like 400. I have right now 60 ducks, 8 chickens. I haven't lost a bird. Not a single one. Not worried about it. If a chicken gets sick, a chicken gets sick. If it dies, it dies. No problem. Then what you do is you end up building up immunity in your flock. It's how our grandparents did this. The world has not biochemically changed that much that we now need to start killing chickens because one chicken is sick. If anything, you get rid of the sick chicken. But here's the thing, guys. They're not even having chickens get sick. What they're doing is they're randomly testing chickens with PCR tests. And if the PCR test says some of your chickens have flu, now we have to kill them all. That's what they're doing. And they're paying the producers to kill the chickens. Right now, one of the most profitable things that can happen to you as a chicken house is the government tells you to kill your chickens and writes you a check in return for doing it. And there's a fundamental reality. I think there's a lot of people on the left, they don't even know where eggs come from. I mean, in theory they do, but they don't really understand. When I say they don't know where they come from, if you ask them, where do we get our eggs? They would say a chicken. But if you'd say, when a chicken lays an egg, how long does it take for the egg to hatch? They don't know the answer to that question. And then you say, after the egg hatches, how long does it take the chicken before it can lay an egg? They don't know the answer to that question. It's about 24 weeks. It's a little over 6 months. It's a little over 6 months. So right now you have all these hatcheries churning out babies. And by the way, killing the males almost instantly and turning them into dog food. You know the factory chicken industry that does eggs handles surplus males? Remember, they have no meat value. You do not have, any of these big egg producers using dual purpose birds. They have specific production birds. And those birds produce for one season. They're killed at 18 months and they're sold again into either the pet food industry or like the canned soup industry and stuff like that. That's where they go. They take 6 months to produce. They produce for 1 year. When they start molting, they're already being reproduced. They're constantly being swapped out at 6-month increments. That's how they keep that production high. Because it's easier to do that than to wait for that bird to go through 6 to 8 weeks of molt, start laying again, and never reach its peak capacity again. So that's how they manage that industry. Do you think the average person, left or right, screaming about eggs right now has any idea of that? Now, most of you know, because most of you probably don't care because most of you keep your own chickens. I got eggs coming out of my butt right now. I ain't worried about it. Now, on the disconnect of the left, have you guys noticed that every attempt that the left makes at humor or to be cool just dies a miserable death? I can't think of the last successful meme campaign done by leftists. I can't think of the last time people were abuzz about something a leftist said in a positive manner. So we just had this thing last week. They had AOC and what's her name, Crockett, and some Asian chick and some other female Congress idiots pretending to be, I guess, characters in Mortal Kombat or something. Like they could choose your fighter and, they're doing this stupid thing. And they thought this was good. And the left literally said, but look how many views it got. That's people making fun of you. Okay, fine. Same week, they put out this thing. They have, Chucky Schumer come out and he does this speech. That shit ain't true. Talking shit about Musk, talking shit about Trump and all. And it is what it is. It's pretty pathetic. But like 5 minutes later, a video drops of Elizabeth Warren saying the same thing. And then 5 minutes later, a video drops of Corey. And when I say the same thing, if you haven't seen it, literally there was 23 senators put this video out. And they made like a giant Brady Bunch grid. And they're all talking at the same time. It's all the same words. It's like one of those media things that they used to do on late night TV where all the TV stations say the same stupid shit, reading the same AP report. Right? It was Just absolutely abysmally stupid. And then they claimed it was a success because they got a lot of views. But the views were mostly conservative commentators mocking them. Now, one thing you should ask yourself here is, who has enough power to get 23 sitting United States senators to sing from the exact same sheet of music like that? AIPAC. Anyway, just saying. But there's more. Apparently, the left started using AI to make funny, stupid images of JD Vance. So JD Vance takes one of the images and puts it out on his own X feed. And everybody gets like 2.2 million views, and everybody has a blast with it. All of the people that like JD Vance start taking and making their own stupid JD Vance pictures. Like JD Vance is the Hulk, you know. JD Vance is like the dude from Silence of the Lambs, all of this shit, right? All this stuff. And they just start blasting it everywhere, having fun with it. And the left's like, we don't understand. We don't get it. This was our thing. It's not funny anymore. Stop doing it. Right? Why are you doing this? And there's literally like articles now from left-wing rags saying, why is the right doing this with JD Vance when they like JD Vance? And what they don't understand is the basic dynamic of normal fucking men. Like, have any of you ever done this? Like, you're somewhere and a friend of yours, maybe you hadn't seen in a while, walks up and you see him, you go, hey, fuckhead, what's up? And he's like, nothing, douche nozzle, right? And you guys just fuck with each other for a few minutes. And then, like, he leaves. And then your other friend who was there is like, who was that? Oh, that's Bill. He's fucking awesome, man. That dude, he'd give you the shirt off his back. They don't understand this. They don't live in the real world. They do not comprehend. This is just how men take the piss out of other men that we love like brothers. If you're in a group of men who do this and no one ever says anything to you like that, they either hate you or they think you're such a soft fuck you can't handle it. And they probably hate you because of that. Like, this is normal ball busting. Yeah, Liberty Cast right there. We grew up ball busting. They don't understand. And this is the simple reality of it. The reason they can't understand it, they don't understand reality. Everything they do comes off like the dude with the skateboard. Hello, fellow high schoolers, or whatever the hell it was, right? Like, when I showed my grandson, who's 14, the choose your fighter thing with AOC and Jocelyn Crockett and whatever, he almost eye rolled himself into another dimension. I said, what is this? He said, this is stupid adults trying to be cool and doing it really badly. 14 years old. Perfectly nailed it. Now, here's the thing. Kids in kind of that age group, that's what they thought they were targeting. They thought that's who it would go over well with. Gen Zs. And then that thing that looks like a thing from the Muppet Show, the purple-headed rep from New England somewhere, Connecticut or some shit, Rhode Island, I don't know. She looks like some kind of evil bird thing from some old puppet thing. She did this thing where she's walking around and letting her Gen Z staff write her script, and the whole thing is just painful. Have you noticed that everything they do comes out like that? It's a very simple explanation. First of all, when you try to be cool, you can't be. You can't intentionally be cool. Anybody that tries to be cool isn't. People that you think of as cool, they don't give a fuck, do they? They don't give a fuck if you think they're cool, and that's part of what makes them cool. They're also organic. They are themselves. You can hate Orange Man. You can hate Trump. But when he does the YMCA and everybody digs it, you know why? Because it's legit. It might be goofy as fuck. It might be an old man doing a dance from the 70s, right? Boom, 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 boom. But it's something we all hung out in clubs singing and having a party to. And it just happened that way, and it just was that way. There was never a time that a whole bunch of fuckers in suits sat around a big table and said, you know what we should do? We should make a dance for Trump to do. And I'm going to tell you the truth. If that had happened, and if it came off looking the exact same way, it still wouldn't have worked. You can't force these things. And the left has no comprehension of this. But why? Because how do you expect somebody to comprehend reality who thinks that a man can become a woman? How can they have any grasp, even tenuous, on reality when they will actually make that case? How can you take people seriously who tell you to be afraid of measles? This is a disease most people my age and older, we grew up, it existed, no one cared. No one cared. But when the vaccine came out, several years before the vaccine came out, the death rate of measles went through the floor because we discovered things like antibiotics and nutrition. That's it. Measles was never a seriously life-threatening illness for healthy people. It was a life-threatening illness for malnourished children with low vitamin D levels, the end. Or some other method of significant being immunocompromised. Okay? Right now, there was like 200 cases of measles. It's an insignificant number. One child died. That's tragic. But the child that died had RSV, something else, I don't remember what it was, and was put in the hospital for those conditions, then was given a vaccine for RSV, even though they already had RSV, which is just dumb, whatever the other thing was. And then they gave this child who was immunocompromised the MMR vaccine, which is actually what gave the child measles, which is what actually killed the fucking kid. This is a hospital-caused death. But they'll rattle that. They'll rattle that, right? And they'll make you afraid. And, ooh, look, it's scary. They'll even put out AI images of measles that look nothing like measles. And everybody freaks about it. Like, Facebook is riddled with this shit right now. I recently started using Facebook again, and holy shit, the lunacy there is amazing. It's amazing how much crazy there is there. If you are worried at all about measles right now, you're retarded. There is just no reason to worry about measles. Now, I'm going to tell you, somebody just mentioned it. Jane just said, yes, Jack, we all had measles and chickenpox. Mm-hmm. I had chickenpox when I was a kid. Do you know why they haven't started freaking out about chickenpox yet? There's too many of us alive that had it. See, measles was gone by the 70s pretty much. The chickenpox was around in like early 70s. The measles was gone. Because the measles vaccine does work, right? Some of you get very mad at me for that. The measles vaccine does work. It's actually very effective. It's not very effective in making people not die because the measles in general doesn't make healthy people die. It is very good at preventing infection. It's not 100%, but it works. So does the chickenpox vaccine. The measles vaccine didn't stop people from dying, but it stopped people from getting it. So, like, I never got the measles. I was just young enough to be after everybody got the measles. But I did grow up at a time when everybody got the chickenpox. And you're like, the stories some of you guys hear now when you're like 30, you don't really believe this. Your parents actually did send you to places to get the chickenpox on purpose. It was done. Chickenpox parties were a thing. And so I'm going to tell you right now, within 10 years, you're going to hear about deadly cases of chickenpox again. It's back because we'll age out just like we did with measles to where, you know, give me another 10 years and I'm in my mid 60s. And there'll be a lot of people older than me. And you don't listen to old people, do you? I mean, you should, but you don't. I can't believe that anybody would spend more than 30 seconds a year even thinking about measles in America. And if you do, you're retarded. I'm sorry. And you've learned what it shows us, and it's about 40% of the population. About 40% of Americans think measles is at least of significant concern. And these are people you learned nothing from COVID. These are people that if they tell you to put the mask back on tomorrow, you'll do it. Fortunately, we're in a significant majority of people that are on the other side of that issue now. We don't care what you do. We don't care what you say. We're not locking down. We're not masking up. We're not going to do any mandatory bullshit. We're not doing any of it. We're done. They played that. It's over. It's done. And boy, they're trying to start it up. They're trying to start COVID 2.0 up. They found this new bat virus in China that's like COVID, and nobody's got it, and no one cares, but boy, they want it. They love lockdowns. They love mandatory vaccines. I don't think the left was ever happier than they were during the lockdowns. I think it was the happiest moment of their life because mostly you were paid to do nothing. That is the dream of a leftist, to be paid to exist. And they actually think that can go on. Like somebody has to do the shit work to bring you your stuff and make you your stuff and cook you your DoorDash and all that. But boy, they loved it. In fact, I would tell you that I think that the lockdowns are why the left is so miserable today. I really believe that because they got to experience leftist nirvana for about 18 months, full on 18 months of 100% lockdowns, especially in the leftist shitholes like California and Oregon and Illinois and Connecticut and New York. They got to experience what they always dreamed of. You cannot question science. You cannot say anything against the narrative. Everybody has to stay home, which saves the polar bears, right? Oil prices went in the shitter, right? They loved it. They loved it. Now let's move on. You know, we have a lot of discussion recently about health in America. And one of the really significant movements, and I think it is a good movement overall, is we need to get rid of seed oils. Here, I'm going to give you a little clue right now. You can get rid of seed oils for yourself today. You don't need anybody to do it for you. But let me tell you why I'm talking about this particular issue from a health standpoint today. So right after the election, Steak and Shake came out and said, we're bringing back tallow fries. Our fries are fried 100% in tallow only. And everybody started talking about Steak and Shake like it's a nutritional nirvana. I don't care what they fry shit in it, Steak and Shake. This is not food that is good for you nutritionally. It just isn't. Right? We should all accept that fast food is fast food. And there's less toxic, but none of it's healthy. Okay? Easy enough to understand. We all knew this as kids in the 80s and the 70s. If you got to go to McDonald's or Burger King or something, it was a big deal. Anybody got this memory? I remember my grandmother, right? My World War II era grandmother. I got to go to, it was either McDonald's or Burger King one. I think it was McDonald's. And she picked me up after school and I'm going to go spend the weekend at grandma's and grandpa's. And so we stop at the drive-thru and she doesn't really feel like cooking. So she's going to get food for me, my grandma, and my grandpa and her. And I don't remember exactly, Whopper Jr., whatever the hell it was, but bacon. You could have bacon for, I think it was 20 cents to add bacon. And she said, I have bacon at home. If you want bacon on your burger, I'll microwave it for you and put it on at home. Would not go up the 20 cents to add the bacon to the burger because she had bacon at home. And I'm pretty sure that was McDonald's. And what did that mean overall? Honestly, I was thinking, I got some quarters, here, can I have my bacon, please? Whatever. But what it meant was we didn't eat out like that all the time, did we? It was a big deal when you got to go out. People didn't live on fucking fast food. We accepted it, even though it wasn't as bad as it is today, that it was still bad for us. But now we want to pretend it isn't. So everybody was in their ass in a wad this weekend. And the reason was because somebody got a hold of the nutritional information for Steak and Shake fries. And Steak and Shake fries are frozen and partially cooked before they're finished cooked at Steak and Shake, which makes perfect sense. Fast food needs to be fast. But what are they par cooked in? Seed oils. So the tallow fries at Steak and Shake are soaked in seed oil before they're fried in tallow. Oh, and they're also battered with a bunch of bullshit on top of them. So everybody's shocked that steak and shake tallow fries turn out to not actually be health food. French fries are not health food. But there is certainly a difference. This is what your ingredients to French fries should be: potatoes, beef tallow or lard, salt. That should be your entire ingredients. This is the good news. There's a place called the grocery store near you. You can go there and buy a great big bag of potatoes and make your own French fries. And if you want to eat something like a French fry and have it truly be less bad, that's about the only way you're going to get it done right now. It really is. And do you know, there's no good reason for it. Beef tallow costs about twice what vegetable oil does. But only because we don't process enough of it for economy of scale. If we processed it with economy of scale and you took the subsidies out of the seed oils, they would cost about the same. Meaning if every fast food place everywhere, every restaurant everywhere, it became the normal thing to do fry food in tallow and lard, the price of tallow and lard would go down, not up. Because there would then be, once again, an industry in providing it at significant levels. And more, food places like this, they filter their oil multiple times before they actually discard it and replace it. And beef tallow lasts about 85% longer before it needs to be replaced. So the price differential is nothing. It's all subsidy, and it's all about designing things for maximum profit at all times and creating this like demonic symbiosis of industry. Like the same people that own the food company stocks own the drug company stocks, and they like sick people. Sick people don't have time to cook their own food. They rely on pre-processed bullshit. They get sicker, and then they buy more drugs. This is the world you live in. If you want to fix this, then you have to fix it for yourself. There's no other way. You can't. You could pray to the ghost of RFK Jr. or whatever. It's not going to help. It's all bullshit. It's all pain. When people stop buying the garbage, they'll start making not garbage. That's all that it comes down to. And that's not going to happen anytime soon. Real quick, continuing resolution in the House. It's going to pass. And your Republicans have said the following. Well, we know there's wasteful spending in it. We don't have time to get it done and take the wasteful spending out without shutting down the government. First of all, am I the only person like, shut the fucking government down? I don't give a fuck. Like, I am all for shutting down as much government as we can anyway. But what you can't remove, like this one section that funds USAID, you just can't remove it. We have to wait to fight. They're going to fight in September now. They're not going to fight now. They don't have time. You have the presidency, you have the House, you have the Senate. If not now, when? And they're going to blow all the goodwill that they've gained. While they're sitting there cheering on Elon Musk, pointing out that we're funding transgendered operas and shit like that with USAID, they're passing another bill that gives USAID more money. Thomas Massey was right, comma, again, period. And he will be right again in September. And so all of you that think we really did change things with the last election, I've been far more generous than I think most people expected with the good things that have come from Trump, the positive things, and more accurately, seeing the positive in the things. See, that's something that we've lost the ability to do too. And it's made us a very stupid country, a very stupid country. The government does a thing. It's almost never that everything that comes from it is bad. It's that there's all these bad things that come from it, some of these neutral things that come from it, and some of these good things that come from it. And what you need to be doing is saying, how can I position myself to benefit from what they've done? Instead of sitting here with some facade about how like, oh, well, I don't want to be a parasite like them or whatever. They're going to do what they're going to do. One of the biggest problems we have in this country is people actually think that they think matters as to what happens. Like, I guarantee you, you're about to see complete capitulation by Ukraine. Russia's won the war, I'm sorry, and they're ramping it up because they know that they have to push harder to get a ceasefire. But when it happens, the left will lose their mind, and they'll say, it's people like me that made it happen. I have no impact on this whatsoever. I might impact your view of it by giving you like things you didn't know, like there was an 8-year civil war in Ukraine before Russia invaded. That might be important. But it doesn't have any impact on the outcome. That's why I said there's a lot of things that I don't talk about because just because we're upset about them doesn't change the outcome. But that's what's about to happen there. And you're going to see everybody get blamed who told you what was going to happen and was right. It'll be our fault. Even like I know my pay grade, and there's a lot of things people think I impact that I don't. But that's so far beyond it, I don't even want to have the conversation. All right. Let's end with something kind of cool, I think, anyway. I did a post. Somebody posted a picture of like, it was clearly like a 1980s Pizza Hut. And they said, don't forget what they took from you. And it was just that picture. And it made me think about what Pizza Hut was like. You know, I said we didn't go out all the time. I'll tell you one of the places you got to go out to in the 1980s, if you were a kid, was Pizza Hut. Pizza Hut was a big deal to get to go to Pizza Hut. It wasn't quite Red Lobster. Both of them have gone to shit, haven't they? But I mean, if you got to go to Red Lobster as a kid in the 1980s, you were lucky. But everybody sooner or later got to go to Pizza Hut. Either you went with your family, you went with your friend's family, you read books at school and got a free pan pizza, so they had to take you. And it was a very good quality middle-class place to eat is what it was. So I did this post, and boy, this went way more viral than I thought. I just did it because I wasn't feeling very good, and it was kind of fun to write about, you know. Perfect day in the mid-'80s. If you're over 45, let me know if this takes you back to something, okay? You're 13 years old. You check your quarter stash, and you have $3.75 in quarters. Dad comes home and says, we're going to Pizza Hut for dinner. You get there, they're throwing dough in the air. The salad bar is full, and there's a new pinball machine next to the sit-down Galaga, Miss Pac-Man, and Space Invaders machines. Money for Nothing by Dire Straits is thumping on the jukebox. In walks your best friend and his family, who is sat one table away from you. You push the tables together. Dad orders 2 pitchers of beer, and you know this will go on for 2 to 3 hours. Dad puts down $35 at the end of the night, which includes a $7 tip to the server. This is what they took from you. That was America. I don't know that we've ever been more peak what we think of when we talk about the blue-collar American dream than that time. But was it real? Was it real? Let's be honest, it was long after the death of hard money, wasn't it? That was 1971. It was the vestiges of that period of time. But here's what I mean by was it real or was it imaginary? It was real for us. You were 13, 14, 15 years old, 10 years old, 11 years old, 12 years old during this time. It was an absolute magical time to be a kid. You know what kids don't do? Look for jobs. Kids don't look for jobs. They don't pay mortgages. Early 80s, mortgage rates were still 12, 13, 14, 15%. If we had been our parents at that time, would we so fondly remember it? And I'm not sure. My gut is to some degree we still would, because we were able to, like, if you were a parent back then, you just let your kids go do shit, and they did shit. And sometimes kids got hurt, but usually they didn't die, and everybody was okay, and life went on. And the reason I'll say that I think that despite some of the economic problems of the time, that it was still probably a good time even to be a young adult. Is when I think about if we needed money as kids, how easy it was to make money as kids. Like, we used to pray for snow for 2 reasons in high school. Do you know why? Number one, they closed school. They closed school. That's a pretty good reason for a kid to pray for snow. What was the other reason, though? What did you and your buds do when it snowed in 1987 and when you got like 6 inches of snow? You went and grabbed that fucking snow shovel, baby. You went out and shoveled your yard first because you had to, because you weren't going nowhere until you got that done. And maybe they gave you a few bucks. Then what did you do? What did you do? You started walking around, knocking on doors and saying, can we shovel your snow? I remember some weekends going out and shoveling snow and making $50. $50 in 1987 for a kid for shoveling snow? It wasn't that hard or anything. And most of the people had little short driveways and shit. And when you got a big driveway, you might get $20 just for one driveway. Sometimes we make a couple $100 on a weekend. Or mow grass. We could go out and mow grass. We could go out and pick up pop bottles. They were $0.10 a piece. Every 5 bottles was 2 video games. You know, mow somebody's lawn for $5. I could buy $5 at 22 shells. I always had money. I was poor, and yet I always had enough money to do everything I wanted to do. Just by being willing to do a little bit of work. I don't know if that can be done anymore. I try not to be too hard on my grandkids. I don't really know what it's like to be a 14-year-old in 2025. But I know what it's not. I know what it's not. It's not like being a 14-year-old in 1985. It isn't. Amy B said babysitting $2 an hour. But what did you do, Amy? Right? You took the kids. You made sure they didn't kill each other. You talked to your friend on the phone for 2.5 hours. They came home and they handed you $6. Like, yeah, so you probably did your homework or whatever while you were there and talked to your bestie on the phone. You just didn't call them besties back then. Oh, they had call waiting, so when they called to check on you, you could, yeah, I'm here, right? Like every kid I knew had some way that they were hustling a little bit of money, right? Just some way that we could do that. So I do think it was real. Here's my question. Could we ever recreate just the Pizza Hut experience? What if somebody created a franchise, 80s pizza place? Because if you call it Pizza Hut, you got a whole bunch, because Pizza Hut's not going to fix their shit, right? Right. And you can't fix it, because I've had people tell me, hey, we still have an old school Pizza Hut in my town. They still have a salad bar, but the food's shit. Like, this is what I'm saying. Like, I remember going on a class school trip to fucking Pizza Hut, and you walk in and dudes like throwing the dough, old school style, in the air. The food tasted so much better. The salad bar didn't look like somebody sprayed it with piss. It was fantastic, right? Name doesn't matter. It's the building. That's exactly my thought. You put in the shape of the building, 80s pizza, right? You could only even call it 80s Pizza House, right? And put in the old video games, the Galagas and the Space Invaders and the Defenders and all. Maybe a little bit more video game action than because usually you had 1 or 2 machines. The big Pizza Hut had like 3, or 4 machines, maybe a pinball machine, like I said in my piece there. But the whole experience, cheap pictures. Now, cheap relative to today's money. Cheap pizza, cheap pictures of good beer, cheap pictures of decent beer. That's Budweiser, right? Coors Light or whatever. But you know what a pitcher of beer was? It was like $2 for a pitcher of beer. And you don't have to go all the way back to the 80s. I remember when I first went to work for Fluke Networks, I had a rep firm in Western Pennsylvania called Cody & Associates. And they said, hey, can we put something together with this contractor and some other thing tonight? And, I just come from New York City, and you have like a meal with 5 people, and you're in it for like $1,500. I'm like thinking about my, my monthly budget for entertainment. Like, yeah, I guess, we go to this place and it's almost like a Pizza Hut. It's all you can eat pizza. It's pitchers of beer. And when they brought me the tab at the end of the night, I was like, did you guys pick up half the, it was like $58. I was almost like, I'm almost going to pay this out of pocket and not put it on my expense report. They're not going to believe me. What I did with this, that was early 2000. It was like 2001, or maybe it was 2000 that was. Pittsburgh for the win, man. But could we bring it back? Could we bring back that experience? Would you go? Or would you just talk about going? If somebody opened up and you walked in and you felt like you were walking into a 1985 Pizza Hut in your hometown, and, a pitcher of beer was $5 instead of $2, right? A pizza was $15 instead of $7. But they were making the fucking pizza for real. And you had that whole experience. You had a server that actually was good at their job, a good quality salad bar, a decent little bar, too, for the adults that are there by themselves. Would you go? I would. But I don't know that my son would, because he doesn't have the memory. He's in his 30s. It'd be an interesting thing. But I would definitely go. I think there's something to it. Now, what you have to be careful is, does it just become another gimmick? And I think it would. That's the problem with it. So there's these places, they look like 50s diners and 60s diners. There's none of the real experience there. All the freaking staff are dressed up like it's the 50s as characters and shit. That's not what a place like that was. And this is where it actually fits in with the Democrat stupidity. You can't fake it. It can't be synthetic. It's got to be real. It's got to be the real experience that was simply a good place for a family to hang out. People could go. And when you went there, you probably saw somebody you knew. I'd like that part of America to come back. I'm not saying it will. All right, let's hit up our item of the day real quick and then take a couple questions, and I need to go. My voice is still not fully recovered. But my item of the day, because I'm still not fully recovered, is the same one as last week. The AeroPress coffee maker. I really, really recommend you guys get one of these if you don't own one yet. The first time you make coffee with an AeroPress, you'll be like, oh, wow. Like I said, the first time I ever made a cup after we got ours, my wife just said, put the French press away. Forget about it. I want this from now on. It's just that much higher level of a really great quality cup of coffee. And, we bitch a lot about expense. And I'm not going to tell you that not going to Starbucks every day on your way to work can change your life, except that it can. And here's why. You're not getting out for under $5. You could be doing a $5 DCA on Bitcoin, and that will change your retirement. That will change your life. All you got to do is make your own coffee. So there you go. All right, real quick, let's take a few questions and wrap it up. 229 Mix. Speaking of government keeping the Bitcoin they have, since Ross was pardoned, would he have any claim to the Bitcoin he had when they took it from him? No, he would not. Because the activity itself was not deemed to not be illegal. So it was seized due to illegal activity. You and I may disagree with that, but I'm answering the question like a lawyer would answer it. No, he won't get it back. In fact, somebody made a meme and it was Ross, and he kind of had this strange look on his face, and he goes, so he set me free, but he gets to keep my Bitcoin? He's good, right? Yeah. I don't think he has. And I think Ross is like, I don't give a shit, I'm free. By the way, I don't think Ross will ever really want for anything in his life. I think that it's probably the case he'll start doing the speaker circuit and something like that soon. He's also been offered jobs by quite a few different Bitcoin companies. 229 Mick, again, will stable coins overcome the delays in banking settlement like Bitcoin Lightning does? Yes, that is the point. To create a condition where you can have international settlements in minutes, which already exists. Understand something about the stablecoin thing. The only thing really changing is the government endorsing it and giving it legitimacy and credibility. That's it. We already have that ability. Anybody anywhere right now can start accepting dollars in the form of Tether or some other stablecoin. And it is relatively quick. It's as fast as the underlying chain, which, if it was Bitcoin, which it isn't, it would be 10 minutes on chain. With Lightning, it's instant settlement. And you are going to see more and more collaboration between the Lightning network and stablecoins. But the bigger news is the government using it to diffuse inflation, which is what is going to happen. And literally, the government stated that at this point. I'm your Huckleberry. Are new tariffs at least matching the corresponding tariffs? No, they're not. That's why I said the clarity comes when you say, if nation A is tariffing us at X rate, what should we tariff them at? And most people, speaking from a mindset of simple fairness, the same thing. The same thing. And one of the provisions that no one's talking about with Trump's tariffs is what he's calling reciprocal tariffs. So Canada's like, well, if you do that, then we'll do this. And he's like, bro, it's already in there. Whatever you do, we do back. So if we jack tariffs up 25% and you say we're adding 10 more, then we do instantly. Your action creates the response. Trump's put in basically a mousetrap. If you try to get the cheese, you're going to get caught. The only way to not end up in the mousetrap is not to go after the cheese in the trap, which for Canada would be simply to say, you know what? We hear you. We'll drop all tariffs if you drop all tariffs. They won't do it. They can't do it. They're trapped. They're trapped. And here's what's going to happen. For all the wailing and gnashing of teeth, and anything that happens in the next 6 months is going to get blamed on tariffs, whether it's related to it or not, whether the country that it is or the industry that it is has anything to do with tariffs or not, it's all going to be because Trump's tariffs. Somebody's going to stub their toe in Cleveland, Ohio, and it's going to be because of a tariff on China or on Canada or something stupid like that. That's what the story is going to be. And then it'll all just kind of go away. Whether the tariffs go away or not is not what I'm talking about. Everybody adapts to everything. And everything gets absorbed, and the consequences ferret themselves out. And you're going to see a lot more domestic manufacturing in America. You are going to see that. That will be one of the good sides. Carson says, catching up, I want tallow fries, and I'm currently rendering Wagyu tallow a customer gave me. Okay. That's a comment, not a question. I'm your Huckleberry comment. Bringing more industrial production back to the nation weakens the economic pressure that other countries can exert on us. More self-sufficiency on a national level. 100%. My bigger concern, other than the trade imbalance monetarily, is the dependence. This is my problem right here. You said it perfectly. Right now, if we were to have some sort of major disease outbreak that needed antibiotics, old antibiotics that we've had around for 50 years, we can't make them in America anymore. We rely on China almost 100% for antibiotics. Maybe we wouldn't have so much fentanyl being imported if it wasn't sitting right next to the shit to make penicillin and ampicillin and erythromycin. Or what kind of country can defend itself when we're not manufacturing our own electronics that operate our own weapons systems? What kind of country can defend itself when it can't make from its own natural resources aluminum and steel and refined copper? You understand how big of a problem this is? How much we rely on the rest of the world? Imports for a country should be a luxury and maybe a stabilizer. So that means that in anything that you would call critical, my instincts would be no more than 15 to maximum 20% of product in any place you could call it a national security issue should come from outside the country. And I don't care how friendly the nation is or how close it is. I don't care if it's Canada, Mexico, or it's China. Relationships can break down really quickly in certain situations, as we've seen. Again, I don't understand Trump's bullshit about the 51st state with Canada. Like, the tariff thing I get. The 51st state thing is like you're just pissing them off for no reason. And I'm waiting to see what the reason really is. Because a lot of times when I'm like, Trump, you're being an idiot, eventually something falls out the other end. I'm like, well, look at that. Look at that, like Gaza. You know, you got billions of dollars being pledged by all these Middle Eastern countries now to fix Gaza because Trump said he's going to turn it into a resort. Like, it sounded stupid when he said it, but the result, part of the deal. I just don't know where you get there with the 51st state thing. This is stupid. First, why would we want that many liberals? They just replaced Trudeau with another liberal. 78% voted liberal. Why would we want to bring in tens of millions of people that vote for this lunacy? Like, there's no way this makes sense unless you want to turn the United States into a socialist hellhole. If you want to make the U.S. more socialist, add Canada to it. Now, some sort of trade agreement, like a new version of USMC. See, the problem is people think that we had this free trade agreement with Canada, the USMCA, right? Well, it's only certain products. So they're still raping our ass on so many things that they tariff on us. So I don't know what he's trying to do. I really don't. But he's I'm your Huckleberry is right. We have way too much dependence on other countries for things that we need to survive, especially if we ever end up at war. Like, we can't prosecute a war without China, and the country would be most likely to end up in war with is China. This is national suicide. Builder of castles, why does my albuterol inhaler with insurance paying part cost more than going to Mexico and buying it off the shelf? That's another one of our big problems, isn't it? Why? Because in America, it goes through all this billing and coding and shit. And you might find out, Builder, by the way, that it would cost you less to just buy it off the shelf here. Now, we do have some medications that are artificially inflated. And then this is the other way this works. So the United States develops all the cutting edge drugs and medications. All is wrong. 80% of them. 80% of them. We then allow these companies to patent them and charge usurious rates on them. We have margins like 4,250% on some drugs in America. Now, I'm all for companies being able to make a living. And I understand that if somebody's going to develop a drug, if it can immediately be made by anybody and the price driven through the floor, then nobody's going to develop. Okay, fine. Yeah. But 4,000, 5,000%, no, you don't need that. And they don't need that. So what happens is then these other countries who pay nothing for their defense because we defend them, or they're proxies of other countries, turn around and they say, well, we'd like to buy that drug from America, of course. Yes, because that's where you make it. That's where Merck is, or Johnson & Johnson is, or whoever, Bayer, whatever. And the drug company's like, well, sure. And they say, you don't understand. We want to buy 2.8 million doses. All in one go, one purchase order. And the drug company says, well, it's, $800 a dose. And that country goes, no, it's not. No, it's not. We know exactly how much money it costs you to make this. And we know that 20% margin is plenty for you on a purchase of millions of dollars. So that's what you're going to get, or we're not going to buy it. And then that company turns right around and sells it for that price. And they're under no obligation whatsoever to cut their price to anybody in America. That's how that works. And that's how that's worked for a very long time. That's another huge problem. Question, Builder says, will people have measles parties in the future like some kids get it and all the neighbors? I doubt it. People are too afraid to do that. And I don't know that you should. I think that, again, the measles vaccine is really effective. There are certain people that shouldn't get it. If you are immunocompromised, you shouldn't get most vaccines. If you're already sick, you don't need to be getting any vaccines. But the real problem with the measles vaccine and so many other vaccines is now they're wrapped up in these multi-dose shots. And so people that have concerns about getting their children vaccinated will end up skipping vaccines they wouldn't have skipped because they can't get just the measles vaccine. And I've talked about this for years, and it's a very sick thing that we've done by making all these combinations where this kid gets like 3 shots, but it's really like 18 different vaccines.
First of all, we give way too many, way too early, and many of them are unnecessary. I don't know in what world. I'm trying to think of the vaccine right now. It's drug dealers get it and sex workers get this disease, and they give it to kids like the day after they're born. And it won't come into my head right now. But there's no reason for a newborn child to get that vaccine. And it turned out that the people that made the vaccine got the government to do it because they said we can't afford to make the vaccine unless we sell enough of the vaccine to make enough money to make it worth making the vaccine. So your government just decided, we'll just give it to kids. Hepatitis. It's hepatitis. I don't know if somebody's commented or not because I'm still on the starred screen, but it's the hepatitis B, I guess, or whatever. Your 2-day-old child does not need a hepatitis vaccine. And if you look at the vaccine schedule that people my age got, it's a very reasonable group of vaccines for childhood infectious diseases that work dramatically well and at a very, very low incidence of side effects. And here was the bigger thing. When you got a vaccine, if you had a bad reaction to it, let's say it wasn't catastrophic, it was just like you had a bad reaction to it. You're like, okay, so Johnny had a really bad reaction to the measles vaccine. He's been vaccinated once already. We're just not going to do that one again. And parents could then make this determination because they got individual vaccines or a couple at a time. And then that way the child had time between each vaccine to have the immunoresponse, build up the immunity before their immune system was shocked with something else. And we didn't vaccinate for every freaking thing under the sun. Now they're giving these kids literally hundreds of vaccines before they're 12 years old. They're giving them dozens before they're 6 months old. This is sick. I'm sorry. It really is. But I don't think we'll go back to measles parties. Colin says, how can I compost animal fur and innards? I have meat rabbits and we eat all we can, but I don't have the time to deal with fur and innards. Fur can just be treated like a protein adjunct at any compost. Innards, black soldier flies. That's what you need. You need black soldier fly there. You're not going to really do just about anything else with, rabbit guts or something like that. Now, if you have dogs, I really recommend that you just feed them to your dogs. But black soldier fly would be the way to compost them. Carson says the Trudeau replacement vote was a party-only vote. We haven't had another general election yet. We need to have one by October. Okay, I didn't know that, and that's good to hear, Carson. And I'm going to bet you guys are still going to put another liberal in charge. You're still going to put another liberal in charge. Abigail says, I just finished college class, and we were asked if measles vax should be mandated. Scary how many people were pro-mandated for the good and safety of society. I don't think any medical treatment should be mandated, personally. I just said that I think the measles vaccine is highly effective. I was vaccinated for measles. My son was vaccinated for measles. I'm not going to be an apologist against that and say, I shouldn't have done it or whatever. But I don't think you should have to do it. I don't think anybody should have to vaccinate against anything. Vaccines either work or they don't. And if they actually work, then your vaccination is for you and mine is for me. And this idea that we all must protect each other because if we don't all do it, it doesn't work is nonsense. It's anti-scientific. And you notice they don't really ever push it that hard with something like measles. Do you know why? Because the measles vaccine actually is highly effective. It's highly effective. I know some of you don't believe that. No, but it is. I know you watched Andrew Wakefield's documentary Vax, and I did too. And I too have concerns with the combined MMR vaccine. And I'm not sure if I'm right or wrong about those concerns. And I don't trust the information so far as to whether or not there's a risk. I don't. Because the way it's been handled, I cannot trust it because it's not been an open debate. It really hasn't been an open debate. But I don't think that we can trust anything that we're being told about any of this right now. I really don't. Let me go ahead and wrap up. Carson says one more thing and we'll go. Me here in Canada hoping the tariffs break the back of the dairy lobby up here. 51st state comments are making the liberals poll better. You know what, Carson? That has occurred to me too. Trump has either done this because he wanted that to happen for whatever weird reason he wanted it to happen, or it's a complete miscalculation. There is nothing that unifies a country like feeling that it's being attacked. And it will make people knee-jerk in support of things that they don't support. And it's been kind of a weird thing for me to see that happen. Anyway, guys, I need to go. As you can hear, my voice is kind of weak. I wish you guys best. I will be tomorrow on early, 9:30. John Willis, Nicole Sauce, first Tuesday, actually second Tuesday. My fault that we had to do that. And then we'll have an interview Wednesday. Just keep back to the regular scheduled programming. Take care, guys. Catch you tomorrow.